It's silent, it's sneaky, and it's wrecking your putting stroke. Tiny wrist movements that you don't even notice are killing your putting stroke. Let's fix that today and get you making everything inside 10 feet. Now, why does this even happen? It happens because your wrists rotate and flip and twist during your stroke. It's just what they're made to do. That's what wrists are made for. And so unless you train your wrist to stay quiet at impact, that's going to happen. And the big problem there is it changes your putter face angle at impact. And that makes a huge difference. For instance, if your putter face is 2 degrees open or closed at impact, and 2 degrees is not very much. Here's what that looks like. But if you're open or closed by that 2 degrees, you miss everything from 5 feet and more. If you're open or closed by 1 degree and you can hardly even tell, you miss everything from 8 foot and more. And 1/2 of 1 degree, you miss everything from 10 feet or more. So having quiet wrists that help you control and keep the putter face square at impact is a big deal. Let's talk about what the wrists do that cause these problems. And I'm not going to use fancy terms like supination and pronation and all of that. I'm just going to give you examples of what goes on here. Now, there are 3 ways that you flip your wrist and move your wrist during your putter stroke, and even a subtle amount makes a big difference. The first one is you keep your wrist square, but you flip it, and the problem there is that changes the putter stroke up or down and causes you to either skid the ball or launch it. Now, I know everybody's going to say, oh, there's one tour pro who uses his wrist in his putting. Yes, Brandt Snedeker did that, does that when he still plays, and he had hours a day to practice that and perfected that. Takes perfect timing, and he's the one exception on the Pro Tour who did that consistently and got away with it. You and I are not that exception. We need to learn not to flip our wrists that way. Second thing is when you turn your wrist a little bit over the top, like a baseball pitcher throwing a screwball, that causes you to pull everything. That's the biggest mistake that I say, but there's also the third way of rolling your wrist underneath like you were throwing a curveball. If you're thinking about a baseball pitcher, it curves this way. That causes you to push putts to the right. That's also a problem. I also see a lot of golfers with what I call wobbly wrists. Sometimes they're this way, other times that way, and other times this way. It's just all over the place, and the problem is that causes the putter head, of course I'm exaggerating, but that causes the putter head to wobble like a flopping fish. All right, now that you've seen how the wrists can wreck your putting, let's talk about how to fix them and kill this silent killer for good. Number one, a good solution for a lot of people is putting with their lead hand low. And you can see when I set up with my lead hand low, it puts this trail hand, my dominant hand, in a weaker position. So that if I keep my lead hand low, I have a really hard time flipping this wrist. In fact, I have to do it on purpose. So lead hand low will help with that. I don't recommend lead hand low for everybody, but if you are right-handed and extremely right hand dominant and you just can't keep this wrist from arcing or moving or flexing during the putting stroke, lead hand low might lock that up for you and help you. Solution number 2 is the possibility of going to an arm lock or a lean lock putter. And I don't have one here on hand. I've done video on that on the channel a few weeks back. You really ought to look into that and check it out if you're considering this as an option. But what it does is it locks this lead arm on your putter so that now your trail arm it's pressing against your forearm instead of your wrist. And your forearm doesn't flip because it's a long bone here. That works for a lot of people. By the way, if you're using an arm lock or lean lock or longer putter like that, there's some considerations you have to make. Again, I mentioned those in the previous video. Also would say to you that Bernard Langer, when he first started, and some other players as well, were actually using the shaft against their dominant arm and holding it in a multitude of different ways. You can check out all of that. Again, not my favorite, doesn't work for me. I don't do it, and I do have this problem with an extremely dominant right hand, right eye dominant, and putt that way. And so I've had to learn to control my wrist. Solution number 3 is what's worked the best for me. Solution 3 is using the One Putt Ruler that I developed in collaboration with Puttline Golf. You see, what I discovered a number of years ago is in this 5 inches behind the ball, if you make a stroke that keeps the putter face square to your target line, that's good enough. So we came up with this One Putt Ruler. The ball goes here, and I've got alignment lines in these 5 inches behind the ball that help me line up and keep the putter face square, and then roll it over this intermediate target, this little dot 9 inches out in front of the ball. And I set this up a lot of times with a T-drill, a gate here for my putter head, and a gate here just barely as wide as the ruler. And I work on that and work on that and work on that. And what you discover is you cannot roll the ball through these tees if you have any movements, even micro movements in your wrist. Link to get one of these in the video description, but it helps. You can carry it in your golf bag, take it out onto the practice green, use it when you practice like I'm doing here in this video. It helps you start putts online, which is the goal and what you're trying to do with maintaining quiet wrist. A fourth option to learn how to tame your wrist in your putting stroke is the Hackmotion sensor, like the one that I'm wearing here. It's a measuring device. You take it out, calibrate it with your arm flat, and then with your arm rotated at 30 to 45 degrees. So that's a flat wrist for you and for your putting setup. And then you set up to a putt and make strokes from that, and it measures your wrist movements from micro to large wrist movements. I'll try to make a stroke here. I have it set for a 3-foot putt comparing to a PGA Tour Pro. So I hit it about 10 feet. It registered that putt. And let's look and see what it says. Gives me biofeedback. Right. And it says for that putt that I had a teeny, tiny, tiny micro movement with this right wrist, right at impact. But it also tells me, because you can set it up to compare yourself to PGA Tour, to a scratch golfer, to your own results to see that you're making improvement and getting better. It tells me why I had a very small micro movement in my right wrist, that stroke compared favorably with a PGA Tour. So I'm happy with how that started. You can practice with this thing and make tons of strokes, but it will tell you how you're moving your wrist, if you are, what you need to change, what you need to work on. There's a new feature that actually measures the speed of your backswing and your through swing and tells you if one is too slow or the other, so that you can develop a smooth rhythm and tempo. And the important thing about that is that smooth rhythm and tempo causes you to strike the ball more consistently on the center of the putter face, and in other ways it helps with your speed and distance control because you're working on a smooth stroke. Big help there. It also helps with your full game and your shots from pitching and chipping all the way up to your driver. Now, full disclosure, Hackmotion sponsored this video, and what that means is they did not pay me. They asked me if I would talk about the new feature on the Hackmotion sensor and give you a demonstration of it, which I've done here. I don't get paid for that. If you use the link and the discount code that I put in the video description, I will get a commission from Hackmotion. So full disclosure there, it's a great tool if you have the budget and you're technical. But again, you don't have to have this. You just have to have some method to work on controlling your wrist and taking them out of your putting stroke. Now, any of these things that I've mentioned can completely clean up your putting stroke, but there's one critical key. And that critical key is if you've been having wrist movements in your putting stroke, that's your default. And your brain has that hardwired into your stroke. It's just like driving a car. You don't have to think about it. You just do it because you've done it so many times. But remember back when you first started doing it, it was awkward. You had to think and go through the process over and over and over again until your brain wired that as a new pathway. Same thing here with learning to putt and taking your wrist completely out of your stroke. You're going to have to make 500 proper, good, correct repetitions of that. That's just what it takes for your brain to go, oh, wait, we keep doing this. We keep focus on this. It must be important. And then your brain starts noting what you're doing and working on. And you get it right about 500 times, and that becomes your new natural and your new normal. Now, I know a lot of you are probably thinking, oh man, that's a lot of work. Well, it's way less work than missing putts because of your wrist for the rest of your life. So put in the effort, it's worth it. All right, quick recap. If you just can't fix it any other way, you could try lead hand low. I don't recommend changing to that as your first choice. If you can't correct it another way, try lead hand low, or you could try a wrist lock putter, or you can check out the link in the video description and get the One Putt Ruler and work on training and teaching yourself to keep the putter face square. You have to quiet your wrist to do that. Or if you like technology and you have the budget and want to use the Hackmotion sensor and get the benefits of having that for your long game and the rest of your game as well, that's a good option. But whatever you do, you've got to groove this new stroke pattern with your wrist out of it at least 500 correct and proper repetitions. If you got value today, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. Also, take the easy tap in on that subscribe button. I post new content every Wednesday morning and every Friday morning and occasionally times in between. Check out the products that I mentioned and referenced in the video description. And if you're ready to master your putting stroke once and for all, check out the course that I've created called How to Putt the Right Way. It solves this wrist problem from the very beginning so that you don't struggle with that and your confidence will grow. Also, you'll want to check out this video on the screen now, and remember, quiet wrists, quiet, confident mind, more made putts. See you next time.